Communications Minister Malatsi says that it's disingenuous to connect his issuing of a draft policy directive which gives satellite companies like Starlink a workaround of the country's triple BEE laws with the trip undertaken by the SA delegation to Washington. In the Gazette issued by Malatsi came last week when President Cyril Ramaphosa was in the United States for a working visit to, amongst other issues, explain our country's transformation laws. This includes pushing against the false claim by tech billionaire Elon Musk, who was also in the Oval Office, that his satellite company Starlink is unable to operate in South Africa because of what he terms as race-based laws. Communications Minister Malatsi now joins us live for more on this. Minister, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. So when you appeared before the committee, one of the questions that was asked was in relation to the directive, of course, to ICASA, the draft direction to ICASA, but also what ICASA's recommendation was to the minister, and their recommendation was rather go for the amendment of the Electronics Communications Act instead of this directive. What informed Minister's decision to go against that recommendation?
Good morning, Adrian, and morning to your viewers. And I think it's important to contextualize what the process of the directive is, which includes the consultation with ICASA. So Section 3 of the Electronic Communications Act empowers the Minister of Communications to issue directives to the regulator on any relevant issue within the portfolio and also those that affect the execution of national policies. So the first step in that process is to formulate a draft policy, which we did around the 4th of October. And that policy directive sought to have one key question answered, which is the full introduction of equity equivalent investment programs in the ICT sector in its entirety, because we've got a very unique situation wherein, in terms of the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act, which makes provision for the introduction of equity equivalence, and also in considering the ICT sector codes, which are part of a series of sector codes that are applicable in different sectors. They make provision for equity equivalence. However, in 2021, ICASA formulated ownership regulations that impact the issuing or applications around individual licenses. Those regulations focused on one aspect of ownership, which was around equity. And the broad-based economic empowerment laws of the country stipulate very clearly that for multinationals wishing to enter the South African market, there are two possible avenues to do so. One being the option of selling up to 30% of your shares to local residents, or through the equity equivalent program. So we formulated that draft policy, sent it to ICASA as we are required by the process, so that the ICASA can provide its views on it as they are entitled. They did so, and in the final position of their submission, they expressed what they prefer. And they underscore also that it is within the minister's purview to consider all the options that are available at his disposal. And it is with that recognition that I took the decision that the best instrument in this case to use would be a policy directive, which will include the stage where we are in now, which is the public comments stage. We gazetted it last week, Friday. And I want to deal with a related question that you raised in the prelude, which is around timing. When we started the work on this on the 4th of October, and there is official public communication that we did in the form of a press statement when we wrote to ICASA for the first time, we outlined, even in the media engagements that we had, that our goal is to aim towards finalizing the draft policy towards mid-2025. At the time, we would not have had the premonition nor the foresight to anticipate that there would be an upcoming state visit that take place that can somehow be connected to the official gazetting of it. And this is not about one company, as some narratives have sought to perpetuate it to be. It is about ensuring that there is parity in applying the regulations that exist. to ensure that the same rules will apply to all players in the sector and that those rules are applied consistently in our sector.
Yeah, but I still want to go back to this, Minister. What was
Sure.
ICASA's reasoning behind saying rather go the amendment of the ECA route instead of what Minister is saying now is the best tool? What is it about this directive and this approach that the Minister has taken that makes it the best in comparison to what ICASA is saying? And I don't know if Minister is at liberty to tell us what their rationale of ICASA was to say rather amend.
I think in fairness to that process, because ICASA is an independent regulator, you can get an opportunity to invite them for them to expand their reasons. But the final summation of their reasons was that, in terms of what it ought to do, they believe that, the regulations are necessitated by aspects of the ECA and SA result. Their view is that that would be what they prefer. And there's a very important distinction in terms of the ICASA Act and the ECA Act, that while the regulator may express its preference and its views, it can't stop a minister from exercising his power in exploring what he deems are the best instrument in answering the questions that he seeks to answer. And it may well be, Aldrin, it may well be that in the final formula, because this is a draft policy directive, right, that in the final formulation of it, that you may require an amendment of the ECA. And in fact, anyone who has paid attention to developments in our sector, there's been widespread observations about the need to amend the Electronic Communications Act for various things, including broadcasting, including on competition matters. But this question that we're seeking to resolve can be resolved through a policy directive. So this instrument can be delegitimized on the basis that other people then feel that it shouldn't be used because of a fear of a minister exercising the legitimate powers that are bestowed upon them in terms of the law. It is within the prescripts of the law.
Yeah, and again, with the amendments, the spokesperson, sorry, not the spokesperson, but the chairperson of the committee saying that they have been saying that the Electronics Communication Act, for instance, is outdated. It should be amended. Is there going to be a process that is started around the amendment of the Electronic Communications Act? This is now speaking outside of this draft policy directive.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's something that we all recognize.
So then why don't you go that particular route with everything then, Minister?
And this is the question that I keep answering, that the direction of a policy directive is not an illegitimate step. So you can't delegitimize this on the basis that you are uncomfortable with the minister proceeding in that way. It is one of the instruments that are available, and I've come to the determination that because what we are seeking to resolve here does not require an amendment of an existing section of the legislation, that it can be answered that way, because it speaks directly to harmonizing or aligning an existing regulation actually with an act. It does not need specifically to amend a section of the Act, because we want to give full meaning to what the provisions of the ECA says when it speaks about empowerment or such other conditions to pursue transformation and empowerment priorities of the country.
Yeah, and then what's Minister's explanation to the public around going this particular route once again, knowing very well that you are from the Democratic Alliance, political party that is also against the BEE laws of the country. Of course, currently you're an executive member that needs to uphold the current laws of the country, but you also come from a political party that is against the BEE, that sees BEE as a hurdle to economic transformation and also economic activity.
I mean, the response to that is very clear. What we are seeking to advance in here is actually in compliance with the broad-based economic empowerment laws of the country, because equity equivalents are made for in the bouquet of empowerment laws of the country, because they speak particularly to alternatives to investments, which can include doing business with local suppliers, investing in job creation and infrastructure, investing in research and development, and particularly in our sector, investing in enhancing digital access, and in this case, expanding broadband connectivity. I'm a proud member of the DA, and I'm not ashamed by my association with the DA. And I'd say that that fear in this case is misplaced, because what we are seeking to do is to ensure that empowerment reaches the widest spectrum of our country to resolve the question that we face and the challenge that we face as a country in terms of enhancing access to connectivity, which is a fundamental right in this day and age.
Your GNU partner, the ANC, has come out clear that they are opposing this policy directive, even calling it unconstitutional and unlawful. From the executive's point of view, what happens if there is now a disagreement from the ANC as well as the Democratic Alliance, possibly two of the main parties in the government of national unity? Is this something that should be taken to the clearinghouse mechanism at all? Or is it something that the minister can deal with solely and it doesn't have to go through cabinet?
Absolutely not. I mean, and I'll take a step back to contextualize it, to indicate that there is cabinet support and cabinet recognition for this. You would know that the medium-term development policy, which is the government's 5-year strategic framework that entails and includes all the plans and the targets and the performance indicators for government departments. When we made the submission for the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, in that we included the full introduction and recognition of equity equivalent investment programs in the ICT sector. Subsequent to that, and through a series of engagement, the medium-term development policy was adopted by cabinet, and that is a matter of record. So that deals with the issue of the whole sum of support from cabinet on that. And Aldrin, I would invite that you also look at the press statement that the ANC released yesterday, wherein they recognize that equity equivalents are a provision made for in our empowerment laws. And in fact, it concludes that this type of regulatory reforms are important and are needed in dealing with the attraction of investments, but also ensuring that there is equitable application of laws throughout the sector. That is very different to what the members of the ANC caucus in that portfolio committee said.
Okay, and finally, Minister, one of the things that was raised as well during that sitting was that Starlink is operating illegally. You did say that you're not aware of that. ICASA has now issued a statement saying that they would be investigating this. But I remember as far back as 2023 already that there was an issue that was raised around Starlink operating illegally in the country and some people using Starlink unlawfully in the country. And ICASA had then issued a statement there as well saying that they will investigate these matters. Does Minister know perhaps where the crack lines were and why the ministry perhaps wasn't informed that indeed there have been allegations before that Starlink is operating illegally?
Yeah, as I said in the portfolio committee, we're unaware. Anyone who operates in the country illegally, the regulator would have to institute the investigation to establish the facts. And I've got trust in the process that ICASA, as they confirmed both in the portfolio committee meeting and followed up by their press statement, that they would investigate that. Up until Honorable Ndlela from the MK, presented the allegation in that detail, were not being presented with that allegation.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Malatsi is the Minister of Communication.